afternoon. My name is John Mc Ewen, and I would like to talk to you a little bit today about my exhibition, Je pense, I think. And the exhibition consists of two very specific kinds of vehicles. One vehicle is an animal, and the other vehicle is a star. And when I started to work with animals, I did so for a couple of reasons. The first reason was that I wanted a way to be outside myself, outside my imagination, but I wanted to also respect my imagination. And when I found out that children, the first thing that a child refers to that is not their parents, that is not their mother and father, but the first relationship they make is often with an animal, because it's the animal that they understand as being alive, but not themselves. So I really like that idea that the animal is both in our imaginations and outside of our imagination in the world, and that we need the world in order to have a very healthy imagination. So especially we need the variety and the complexity of animals that are our size, that are wild animals especially, because they don't live within our society. They live in their own natural world. And the idea of a natural world is, in a sense, a way to think about a very healthy imagination, because it's that relationship between our imagination and the world that is what I try to get at, and what I try to represent with my work, especially with the steel animals that are very thick and dense steel slabs that are cut usually in the shape of wolves, sometimes in the shape of dogs, and they're always about the same size as they occupy the same amount of space that we do. So you could say that an animal is a worm, but it's not very exciting to think about. But a dog or a wolf that is the same size as us, that really makes our imagination quicken, and it makes it go fast, and it makes us go outside of ourselves, and that makes for quite a variety of relationships between ourselves, the piece of sculpture, which is often a very solid piece of steel, and sometimes I do other kinds of animals. Sometimes they're in cast bronze, sometimes in stars. And at a certain point in time, I decided that I wanted to think about the wealth of the world, and I decided what was the most wealthy way that I could, what was the idea of wealth that I could come up with. And I decided that if you had a lot of stars, that was as wealthy as you could get, that you could make that was a very good way to express the wealth of the world, just the natural wealth of the world, not the dollar signs necessarily, but just the natural wealth of the world. So I just started to work with stars, and there's a couple of interesting things about stars, is that they're the most natural part of the world that we come across. They're always up in the sky, but we never touch them. We just think about them. And in some way they're corollary, like they're equivalent to our mind. So we have the space of our minds and our imagination, and we have the space of the sky and the stars. And in some ways they're the same. You know, they're the same kind of space. And there is an old story, an Aboriginal story, a First Nation story about the constellations. And the coyote, which is often a very tricky kind of animal within native mythology, is also, well, is often called a trickster, but the creator charged the coyote with making the constellations, you know, like the Big Dipper and the Big Bear, all of the constellations that we have in the sky, and the coyote was charged with making them from the creator. So, but the coyote, being very vain, decided that he or she would keep all the stars for himself. And of course, that's why when you see this Big Dipper, it only has like 9 stars, or, you know, so sometimes you think, well, how can you make a bear out of those stars? But that's because, of course, because the coyote was keeping all the other stars for himself. And so I like the way that we use stars to represent our thoughts, because they're they're a very interesting way to try to understand how come we've got here. And some people now say, some scientists now say that we are the creation of stardust and time. That means that at some point 800 million years ago, some sort of basic dust came to the world, perhaps from a comet, and then over millions of years it evolved into more complex life, and then finally it evolved into us. And so we're now at a point, of course, in time where we might be able to change life very quickly. So we always have to remember that life took an awful long time to get here in the way that we are. So it's always a good reminder to always keep in mind that we are the product of stardust and time.